Okay. So we are ready to go. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Flexpipe cart design webinar. For today, we're going to be talking all things related to cart design. We're going to emphasize a lot on something that I kind of began to think about, and it's kind of the saying that I want to leave everybody with in mind, and that is to adapt to your environment. So the idea here is that we're building custom designs. Therefore, we want to be able to exactly do so by adapting to our environment. Okay, so that is the thought in mind. So keep it around and use it in the future when you continue to build a custom design. Okay. For today, again, my name is Esteban. I work at Flexpipe. Happy to be joining everybody here today. Along with me are some of Flexpipe's finest crew. We have some of the best project managers in the world, if I may say so myself. And they will be more than happy to help with answering any questions that may pop up along the way. During the webinar, we will be answering questions through the chat. So again, we encourage everybody to use the chat should you have any questions that come in mind, and the project managers will help answer these along the way via written form. And then in the end, for the last 15 minutes, we will be able to answer them orally in that sense, so that we don't interrupt during the actual webinar, okay? So don't be shy and make sure to go ahead and write down those questions that you have, any expectations that you may have in mind today, something that you really want to make sure that we cover. Those are the kind of things that we want to make sure that you go ahead and use the chat for. Okay, guys? The idea here, again, it's something that when I think about, when I do trainings, whether they're at home, at Flexpipe, or away, or through the web, I always think about not how to build a cart, but rather really why we're building carts. And that's really the main thing here is why. So ask yourself why as many times as you need to really essentially trim the fat, right? Get rid of anything that you don't need and really become as lean as possible throughout all the design process. So why we're building custom cart solutions? Because we are gaining benefits by designing custom carts, right? We're gaining flexibility. We're becoming more efficient. We're thinking about ergonomics, and through ergonomics, again, we're increasing the safety of the operator and the overall safety of everybody in the facility, okay? So the idea here is to essentially build custom solutions to improve workflow and also increase safety for everybody around the environment, okay? The way that we design and the way that I'm going to be showing everybody today is that we are using the Sketchup software along with the Flexpipe Creator extension, which we have created to simplify the design process, which essentially is going to cut down the design by at least 50%. But whether you're using SketchUp, whether you're using SolidWorks, Solid Edge, or excuse me, the good old-fashioned sketching by hand, the idea is the same. The thought process is the same. So that's what we want to emphasize today. If you have any more questions regarding the Flexpipe Creator extension, we will be more than happy to answer those for you. If you already design with the Flexpipe Creator extension, then this is just going to be more information for you to gather and to use in the future. When we're thinking about types of carts, we'll generally have there's about 4 or 5 different types of carts that are generally seen. So let's go over those now. Okay, so we have kitting carts, and ideally these are more to collect parts, to cater to a particular process, or even to assemble a complete product. So these are something that you will see a lot of times, oftentimes during the the building process in any facility, okay? And the nice thing about this, we're thinking about it, is to think about custom slots that ensure that those parts are there for that particular reason. Therefore, nobody else will be able to take them because they are they pertain to a particular process. Okay, guys. So this is one of the type of cards that you will commonly see and use during the when thinking about building cards for your facilities. Another type of card that we commonly see are the tugger cards. And these are commonly used to transport, to replenish flow racks. The nice thing about these is that they can be joined together and essentially create a trolley or a train system, which will replenish your entire factory all at once, okay? So this is a nice option to think about, especially when you have large facilities, large facilities that take up a lot of space, where walking from one place to another can be facilitated by joining these together and using a tugger to guide them along the way. With cards, work in progress cards is something that, again, that is also commonly seen. Again, these are very good solutions to move goods in progress, right, from one station to another. This is a great way to go ahead and be able to customize structures to hold any product at any given stage of the process, okay? The warehouse picking cars, this is a little more specialized in the sense that the warehouses all have different components in each facility. Therefore, these warehouse picking cars will always be a little bit more, will have a more of a stylish look to them depending on the facility that and the components in your facility, okay? Truck cards, again, even here at Flexpipe, we use a similar type of truck cards because right now we're working between two different facilities. So therefore, we end up using these quite often at Flexpipe as well. And again, this is a good way to transport from one facility to the next, and you're saving time by not having to unload and reload from one to another, therefore saving any unnecessary handling. The thing to keep in mind when you're using these truck cars is to make sure that they are properly secured when they are in transport. So these here, you can go ahead and strap them to a truck to get them to your next place. They also will usually have some kind of a forklift system where you can go ahead and lift them and stack them on top of each other, strap them down on your truck and get them over to the next place. Again, the idea here is to save unnecessary handling. So when we're thinking about any kind of structure, any kind of part, and whether, again, we're designing with SketchUp, SolidWorks, Solid Edge, or Hand Sketch, the idea is the same, is that there's a couple steps, there's 5 steps that we always want to essentially by. And the idea here is to, first things first, is we want to define how the card must meet your needs. Okay, guys, so this is where I'm asking myself, why am I building this card? And oftentimes you be asking yourself, what is the part that is going to be used, or rather, what is the part that is going to be transported, right? We want to talk about the shape, the weight, is it fragile? How much does the entire part weigh? How many will there be? This is going to also help us understand how much floor space we have available for this particular part. Again, depending on your facility, you may be restricted to a particular space. Therefore, again, your design is based upon the needs. And again, we emphasize adapting to your environment. Okay, so that is very adapting to the environment is something that is very constant throughout the design process. The distance that your cart will cover, again, that's a very important point. How far is it point A to point B? How many times is this cart going to be used? Also, is there any constraints? Is there any obstacles along the way that you need to think about? So again, you want to answer these in the beginning so that you get clear, precise, and straightforward solutions at the end. Okay, guys? Second thing that we want to talk about again, once we've established what the part is and how far it's going to go, then we need to understand what the casters are going to be adapted for. Okay, so we want to talk about whether it's going to be a light duty card where we can get away with using stem casters, maybe a 3-inch stem caster, maybe it's just a cleaning station cart that doesn't require too much weight on top of it, so therefore you can get away with using a 3-inch caster for such a light duty type of application. But if we're talking about using a cart that is going to transport a particular piece that is fragile, or that you really want to make, or it's a heavy piece, or anything that you really want to make sure that it stays where it needs to be, then we always recommend using the 4-inch casters, and also make sure that they are going to be plate casters so that they essentially last the longevity that they're intended for. Okay, casters are very important. These are the feet, your shoes, and if I believe, it makes me think about Forrest Gump and the way he used to think about shoes. For him, it was a very important thing to have the right kind of shoe. And for carts, also, it's a very important thing to be able to understand the type of caster that is going to help you get the job done. For heavy duty, for uneven floors, for long transports, changing levels of heights, then maybe you want to go ahead and think about using 6-inch casters that are going to be able to help get you from point A to point B without having anything happen to the items that are being carried from point A to point B. And we'll go over this a little bit more once we get into the actual drawing of the webinar. But these are the ideas, the thoughts that we want to go ahead and make sure that we think about along the way. Okay. Next thing here is that we're going to go ahead and look at the step 3. And, there we go. Okay. So position casters for optimal stability, right? We're thinking about the particular items. We want to make sure that the casters are in the right place so that it makes it easier, and generally for the, it makes it easier to maneuver around the facility. As a general rule of thumb, we think about always having casters ideally placed from 24 to 48 inches. When the distances exceed the 48 inches between each caster, then we want to think about adding casters in the middle to be able to compensate the weight. If we look at the examples on the screen here, we see that if we have too much weight in the middle with nothing to support it as far as a caster, then we're going to have deflection depending on how much the parts, pieces, etc. are on these caster. Okay, so we want to make sure that we think about that, and then don't be shy. You can also go ahead and adjust casters depending on what is happening with that particular structure. Nothing is written in stone. You can always go ahead, and the beauty about these kind of systems is that you can always go ahead and adjust and modify if needed be. So that is the beauty of building with the tube and joint system, right? So if you see that your structure begins to bend, begins to deflect, then go ahead, and if you don't have a caster, go ahead and add more casters, or maybe even just position the ones that you already have in place a little bit closer to each other to compensate for the type of weight that's being. So once you understand what the weight is, we want to also understand what the size of your cart is going to be for safety and for comfortable maneuvering, right? We want to be able to see where we're going. If we're pushing this car, we don't want to be obstructed. We don't want to have our view obstructed by any parts, essentially potentially creating a safety hazard, okay? So general idea here is to keep your cart height under 60 inches to ensure, again, that the operator can easily see any oncoming obstacles. And ideally, the cart should be at least 24 inches wide by 24 inches long. Obviously, different situations call for different setups, but ideally you want to kind of hang around this area here and then adjust according to. You don't want to have a cart that's too narrow that is going to want to flip over on its side by being too tall and too narrow. So start with the 24 by 24 and then begin to see according to the pieces that you are going to be moving to see how much you can adjust or diminish from this 24 by 24, but always keep in mind at least the height of the part to be able to see properly without having any obstruction in the way. And step 5 here, we want to talk about handles, right? This is being pushed essentially, so we want to make sure that the handle is thought of ergonomically. We want to make sure that the person, the operator pushing this cart is able to do so without having to struggle to push it, okay? So there's 2 ways of placing handles. Ideally, one is the horizontal way and the other is the vertical way, depending on what the operation demands. You will have these 2 different setups. The idea with the vertical handles, if we think about it, sometimes they're going to be probably a little bit closer to each other just because you don't want to have the operator having too much of a wide stance trying to hold the 2 handles at the same time. So we want to probably think about having it more of a narrow position as opposed to a horizontal where the operator can go ahead and easily move across the horizontal pipe and place and grip along the way of the horizontal pipe. But either way, think about for horizontals, horizontal handles will range anywhere between 36 and 44 inches wide. And for the vertical handles, they can range from 36 to 5 inches long. And again, the vertical handles, the beauty about those is that it caters to many different heights as far as the different operators that will be using the cart. Another important thing to think about is assessing if shelves are useful or not. We like to say that if you don't need a shelf, get rid of it. The more you can see through your structure, the better it is, the more clear it seems, the better, the quicker you can see and identify items. But sometimes you do require shelving, so it's also good to know that you can use shelves as well. Generally, we'll be using a 1/4 inch thick surface or a 1/2 inch thick surface, depending what, again, the material, the pipe, the product, the piece that is going to be transported. When installing surfaces, we think about using 2 different methods. One is installing or securing it from the top using a screw to secure the HDPE through the pipe. Or we also think about securing it from the underside of the structure. And this way we use a AOEMT or a pipe clamp that can be secured, placed onto the shelf, onto the pipe, and then we'll fix it with the screw on the underside of the shelf. So those are 2 different ways, very commonly used. We can also think about maybe using or embedding surfaces. We have a particular accessory that can do so. It's an AI corner, and basically are corner brackets that you can use to embed your surface, and then the pipes around the surface are create a kind of a border, if you will, without having to add any more pipes to your structure. So if contouring is what we call this. So basically, if you needed to have a contour around your surface, you can think about using the AI corner to embed. So those are the mostly or the commonly used ways of using the surfaces or installing surfaces. So the idea here is to follow those steps and to think if you need to go back a step, go back a step. If you need to go back 2 steps, do so, just to make sure that you cover all the necessary steps, to cover all the necessary points needed, just to make sure that, again, you adapt to your environment and you make sure that that cart is exactly made, custom, intended for what it needs to be. Okay, so the components listed, excuse me, the steps listed above, again, are going to help you design a lean cart, which is what we want to be able to do. Let's go ahead and look at the design. Now we're going to jump into the SketchUp drawing here. So right here we have 4 different types of cards that we again mentioned in the presentation, in the slides. We can see that they are all being drawn again with the SketchUp software along with the Flexpipe Creator extension. But the thought is the same. They all went through the same 6-step thought process for understanding what the particular part is going to be used for. Also, the casters were thought of. For instance, let's zoom into this one here. The first object here, excuse me, the first one here, this is more of a kitting cart. So we can see that in this case here, we have shelving for the particular parts that are going to be needed in that case. If you have shelving, you can also think about using shadow boards. If you have very fragile parts that may tend to bounce along the way, you can also, again, use shadow boards to go ahead and place those so that they're nice and snug and you know that they're not going to be going anywhere. Another feature in this particular one here is these cantilevered pipes. So again, this is also a good way to think about maybe for those kind of odd objects, maybe maybe components, parts of a door. Maybe you need 4 different types of panels for a particular door. So this is a good way to transport them, right? You have long, irregular shapes. So a cantilever type of design here can help you guys go ahead and place those parts in a nice safety and tight space. The other part that we can see here, we're using a horizontal handle. So again, we're thinking about the type of positioning here for the handle. Again, this one here is using shelving as well. But again, I emphasize, ask yourself if you really need that shelving there in the beginning, okay, from the get-go. Perhaps it's going to be boxes that you're transporting, so maybe you don't necessarily need to have a shelving here. So it's not a bad idea to go ahead and maybe just get rid of it and just go ahead and use your pipes, and also save yourself a little bit of money along the way by eliminating surfaces. At the end of the day, surfaces are one of the more expensive, or rather they're going to take up a little bit more of the budget. So if you want to go ahead and essentially have a little more of an economic build, then you can go ahead and get rid of surfaces and use your pipes to go ahead and support those pieces. But having said that, from time to time, you may also need to use surfaces. So this is a good way to go ahead and install them, like I mentioned before, right? We can install them from the top. And here we can see that we're using a screw to go ahead and pierce through the surface, through the leveling shim here, and then also directly into the pipe, creating a strong contact point between the surface and the structure. And those screws and the AO shims that you use to place surfaces along your structure, think of it, divided into equal spaces. You can divide them into spaces that are spaced out at 12 inches, 24 inches, depending on the type of part that you will be transporting, okay? Another example here of a cart. This one is we can call this a pallet cart. It's also a tugger cart, right? We can go ahead and hinge all these together. If I get in a little bit closer inside of the drawing here, I can go ahead and now see that this is going to flip onto the other structure that is going to be joining these together in that train-like trolley system. This is a heavy-duty cart. You can see here that we're using the heavy-duty caster plates. So these are going to be really hold this all together. They're joining the entire structure. We have a pipe on the vertical as well as 3 horizontals that are being joined together to this nice, strong, heavy-duty plate. And then we're using the 6-inch caster in this sense here to be able to transport easily without having any issue whatsoever when transporting. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that we mentioned, right? If you're looking for a long distance transport, if you're having uneven floors, then do consider using the 6-inch caster. All these parts, all of the drawings, everything that we have here, it comes from the Flexpipe Creator extension where you can go ahead and download all the different parts and just essentially drag and drop any part that you need from the library into your drawing. Again, minimizing the time spent for the design process. And then the last one here that we have is, again, it's another type of card that has the horizontal and excuse me, handles. So again, with the vertical handles, we are going to be able to cater a lot of different heights as far as operators go, okay? And then if we zoom in a little bit more just to look at the little details of each individual part, we can see that we are reinforcing the base here by adding these particular joints, which are the HJ7. So basically they can grab 2 pipes perpendicular to each other, and they do create a nice hold and definitely reinforce the casters wherever they're going to be placed. And they will give a lot of rigidity to your structure. With all of these, again, the thought process is the same. We went through the 6 different steps to make sure to, again, trim the fat and get rid of anything that is unnecessary and go ahead and focus and emphasize on what is there and what is necessary for each individual card, okay? With that set in mind, is there any, if you want to go ahead and write down through the chat, we can go ahead and design a particular card together. So I'm wondering if anybody has a particular card in mind, something as an idea that they would like to see drawn today. So I do encourage the interaction with everybody. So go ahead and don't be shy and go ahead and send us your thoughts as far as what we would like to draw today.
Esteban, do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a quick question here from Heather. How do you design with HJ7 since they don't cross the same line as a HJ1?
Okay, great question. So let's go ahead and jump on over to a empty drawing here, so it's a little bit easier for us to explain without having all the other cards around. Again, right, we're using the Flexpipe Creator extension. So the beauty of this is that we're using Sketchup to create skeleton line drawings. And I like to think of the HJ7 as a spacer joint, where when we draw them, they're going to be smaller lines that connect 2 longer lines together. So for instance, let's go ahead and pick a color here. We'll go ahead and just use the blue for today. And using the line tool, we're going to go ahead and just draw out let's call this a 24-inch line. And the HJ7, it's going to be 1 inch and 9/16 apart. So this is that spacer line that I mentioned. And there we're going to go ahead and create the other one that is going to connect this sense here. So that, let's see what happens there. And there we go, okay? So what we did there, if we go ahead and get rid of the connectors as well as the tubes, we can see that we drew, like I mentioned before, a spacer joint, right? So this is just a small little line. We do have the PDF, which we can provide for everybody. And in this PDF, we give in detail how to draw these particular types of joints, such as the HJ13, the HJ24, and any kind of joint that is going to either hold two pipes parallel to each other, perpendicular to each other. These kind of joints are going to be using this type of setup here. So it's just a matter of understanding what the distance center to center is going to be for those two pipes to be joined together. So in this case, 1 inch and 9/16 is going to give us center to center, where we're going to be able to, again, generate and create the spacer joint. So we can see there, and if I want to, I can go ahead and essentially multiply that as many times as I'd like to, or place it wherever I would need to go ahead and join these particular types of setups. So if I wanted to, I can place one on the opposite end, divide that into two, and then again, the simple use of using just the lines with SketchUp, and then just using the generating tool of the Creator extension to go ahead and create that particular type of setup. And the beauty about all this is that once you have what you need, you can also go ahead and just create that bill of material, and it's going to give you every part that is needed to make this particular setup, your structure part, or whatever other structure it may be. Okay, so now let's see here. We have, let's look at some of the.
Yeah, there's one question, Esteban, if you can hear me.
Yes.
I think from Antonio, he wanted to know what is the weight of a certain car that you showed. I suppose it's the one that had a tow bar, but I think the best way to answer that is maybe if you can just show how you calculate the weight capacity, just a general overview, because every cart is different, right?
Right, exactly. So it's a very tough goal to really understand, to really pinpoint exactly how much weight a given cart can hold. My background is carpentry, so I think of parts the same way I thought of a house, and I think of adding studs, I think of adding supports in different spacing them out, just to be able to hold particular a strong kind of weight, right? A heavy weight. If this is the Antonio, is the blue one the one that you're looking at, or is there some? I believe this is the one. Yeah. So this one here, as you can see, this cart. I mean, we have a good amount of support, of vertical support, holding this weight together. These joints are so close together that there's just no give in those pipes in between. They're using heavy duty 6-inch casters along with the plates, okay? But what I recommend is to go ahead and in the Flexpipe in the Flexpipe website, under learning, there's a lot of information that can help you understand how to really hold that type of weight capacity. So if we open up the technical data loading capacity page, we can see here that the longer the pipe, the less weight it can hold. So in a very simplified form, the longer the supports are spaced out, the less it's going to be able to hold it at any given point in the center of those two, okay? So when we think of that, we also want to think about loading capacities. We have a chart here that can give you an estimate. These particular weights that we see here are going to be the point of no return. That is what I mean. What I mean by that is that if it's 12 inches apart and you have a weight of 867 pounds, as we're looking at here, as I hover over this particular one, that means that once it reaches that 867 pounds, that is going to have a permanent deflection. Therefore, the pipe will no longer be able to be used. We don't ever want to point. I don't think that we're ever going to make a cart. Anybody is going to be able to just go ahead and put a given weight of 1,000 pounds in one spot without thinking about adding the right types of supports. What we want to do is think about spreading the load And I'm just gonna see if this is the right here. So here we go. So we wanna think about spans. And in any given situation, the longest span is going to be your weakest point. So by dividing that long span into um, in multiple spans, in the example here, we have a 36-inch span. And if we divided it into three, we can see that now we're able to hold 972 pounds for that given space. But what we want to think about when we're doing that is also thinking about where this weight is going to be distributed to, because essentially all this weight is going to want to come down. In the example here, we definitely want to think about adding supports in the middle. If you're able to add supports in the middle, if you are having constraints because there's something that needs to be fed into that particular area, then think about adding supports on the sides, think about adding angles to be able to compensate. And ideally, we want to think about weight that is going to get transferred all the way down to the casters. So don't forget about the type of weight and then how it's going to affect your type of casters, okay? So if we look at that, we can see now that there's different types of ways to reinforce your structure. Like I mentioned, right, we're thinking about supports, vertical supports, just straight up and down. We could go ahead and use the angles to be able to have access to the area inside of your structure, if that is the case in point. We can double up the pipes with the HJ13. So this is a parallel joint that is going to hold those two pipes parallel to each other. And then we also can think about adding a 2 millimeter thick pipe, which is a more heavy duty option. Oftentimes you'll see these for bases as well as heavy duty work area or worktops. So for a caster, for carts, it's you can think about using 2 millimeter pipe for bases that are going to ground that weight and prevent that cart from moving side to side. And okay, let's have a look here real quick. So let's go back to that drawing and let's just go ahead and do a quick little drawing here just so we understand the design process, right? We were talking about getting a part that we can think about. Let's just go ahead and do that 24 by 24. So we're just basically determining our footprint. And from there, we can go ahead and begin to draw using the Flexpipe Creator. We can bring this up to 36 inches. Again, all the your card is going to be varied upon the type of application that it's intended for. So in this case here, if I needed to, I can go ahead and just modify this a little bit more because I feel like it's a little bit too tall and I need it to be just a little bit longer for the particular structure that I wanted. Maybe we can go ahead and think about adding a shelving. We can think about adding one in the middle if we needed one here. Maybe we can add a couple supports. We don't want to use the HDPE, so we're just going to go ahead and use the pipes as our supports. I feel that perhaps we can maybe even add a couple more of those there so we can see that we can very quickly set this up. Maybe let's divide this into 4 equal spaces. So now we have a good setup there for supporting there. Will this card have a contoured edge on the top? Again, we can think about adding the accessories for that. For now, let's go ahead and generate this really quick just to see what it looks like in actual tube and joint form. So we can see there that we have a very basic shape, but again, we're thinking about adding casters to the setup here. So we can go ahead and add casters the same way that we're doing everything else with just the line tool and the dimensioning tool as well as the tape measure. So for this case here, let's go ahead and use the tape measure to set ourselves up at 3.25 just to be able to get clearance from the other set of connectors. And then we'll be able to see that we're going to install those casters on those 2 pipes that I've highlighted here. And then we'll want to go ahead and do the same thing on the opposite side. And you can see now that if we were to generate this, we're going to now have the space available to be able to go ahead and drop in some casters. Okay, so there we go. And those two casters here are going, excuse me, these two pipes here are going to be the ones that are going to be holding the casters, the plate casters with the brackets. So very quickly, I'm just going to go ahead and drop into the casters here. And I'm going to look for the 4-inch casters that we're going to go ahead and drop in as a group. And in this case here, let's look at the swivel casters. So another thing that we want to talk about now, actually, it's a good thing to think about, is sometimes we're using swivel casters, sometimes we're using fixed casters. And there's many ways to think about it, but ideally, we think about having casters that are swiveled where the handle is going to be placed, as opposed to having a fixed caster where the handle is going to be placed. We want to facilitate the movement of the caster. We want to have the operator be able to not struggle to turn this around, to push the cart. Therefore, it's going to be something to consider when using, excuse me, swivel plate casters. And in this case here, let's backtrack just a little bit here, because what we did is that we placed the two pipes opposite to each other in this sense here, which is the shorter width. And ideally, we're going to want to actually have those be on the longer end of the part. So we're going to just go ahead and do this here, and we're going to put them over on the sides of the length of the part. Okay, there we go. Now we're back on track. So as easy as that, we're basically just modified, and now we can go ahead and put these casters into place. And all I'm doing here is just using reference points to go ahead and position my casters at the particular point in which I want to have them placed. Okay, so that is going to place the handle on this side here, and then we can go ahead and drop in some fixed casters on the opposite end there, so that the mobility comes from the side of the operator. And there we go. So let's find the fixed casters. Okay, here we go. All right. So again, this is just about positioning casters into reference points, using reference points to position. I see we have a lot of good questions coming in on the chat, and our panel of
Esteban.
Yes, sir.
Quick question from the Q&A. Can you modify this this design by increasing capacity, either maybe doubling the parts, or put diagonals or braces on this existing middle shelf, for example?
Yes, exactly. Okay, good. So basically, we're talking about reinforcing this second shelving here. Okay, so we have two types of angles that we can use, right? We have a fixed 45-degree, and then we also have an angled, multiple angle connector, which you can adjust to different angles, excuse me, depending on the setup of your structure. If you can get away with using fixed 45 degrees, I recommend those. They're going to be solid. They're not going anywhere, and they're going to really give you, again, a triangle is the strongest shape we know of. So I think in that sense, maybe we can go ahead and drop down. Let's go ahead and just drop down 8 inches to place ourselves around 8 and 8. And then we can go ahead and add an angle here. We're going to generate this and we're going to see maybe if this is not enough of an angle, maybe we need to get it a little bit bigger. But the idea here is to be able to generate and modify according to. And we can see here that now we have added that angle there. And again, we're talking about that strong triangle shape, right? So now we're distributing any weight that is going to be applied on that shelf, and it's going to again distribute it back down to where the casters are placed. So that's the idea with that. We can make this bigger. We can go ahead and use a guideline to go ahead and perhaps just go ahead and drop it further down. Maybe we can drop it to another 4 inches there. And then we can use that same guideline to go ahead and create another angle there. But by doing so, we can see that now we have an interference here where these two lines meet. So this is something that you may want to consider. Perhaps you can go ahead and essentially move this out of the way by placing it another 3 inches to the opposite end there to the left. And then you could generate and see that now we have a much bigger angle that is going to be able to have a more strong support for the any weight that is going to be here in the middle. Okay, so that's one way. And then again, we can go ahead and just copy this over and replicate what we just did there on the opposite side. And we can see that it's just a matter of seconds to be able to generate and see this appear and to be able to understand if this is the way that we want to go about making those angles, or if it's something that we need to reconsider and think of it in a different way.
Esteban, can you show also maybe using the HJ13 for doubling the pipes as well?
Okay.
With the
All right,
spacing,
so,
the proper spacing? Thank you.
Okay, good. So for instance, here, maybe we're going to be placing a heavy duty object here. Maybe we're going to have a surface, which we can add in a little bit, but the idea here is to show that, again, the spacer joints, we're going to go ahead and place another horizontal line. And it's HJ13. We're thinking of an inch and 3/8, if I'm not mistaken. And then we're going to go ahead and add a spacer joint in the middle, which is going to represent that HJ13. So let's go ahead and select that there and bring it over to the end there, right? So we're just selecting it and making a copy of it. And there we go. So now we see that we have doubled those two horizontal, the length of the pipe. So we can see that we are now able to hold more weight. We can increase the weight that we want to have around. And in this case here, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and just follow that all the way around and use that same HJ13 on this end as well. And then we can go ahead and just copy this over to the opposite side. And now that we are at this point, since we're going to be adding a surface, we can think about maybe also adding another more support along the way. So if we thought about separating or dividing this space, we can divide this space by creating a guideline, and then we can copy this guideline over, divide it into, let's say, 5. That's a little too much. Maybe we can divide it into 3. And then we can see that we can go ahead and add more support across on those guidelines that we have created there. So we can see now, once we get rid of all the surfaces, or rather the guidelines there, we can generate and have proper support for that particular cart. All right, so if we did that, let's think about maybe adding a surface, right? So let's go ahead and put that surface into place. And then we can see under decking, we can go ahead and drag and drop a surface. In this case, we're going to be using a 1/2 inch HDPE. And then it's just a matter of modifying this to fit the structure. So let's go ahead and use this zoom extend just to clear up the drawing. And I always recommend looking at when you're trying to place and modify surfaces, to maybe just go ahead and look at it from the top view. Again, we're just using the camera view to look at it from the top so that we can really see where we are in accordance to where the structure is, okay? So if you know what your dimension is, you can go ahead and diminish it according to your actual cart. In this case here, we're gonna go ahead and make sure that we're just right over on the edge, just to where it meets the HJ connector with the HJ2 in this case. Then we'll zoom in. And there we go. Okay, so that's a simple way of drag and drop and then placing, modifying your surface onto your structure there. Now that I have those two on the bottom, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and grab these and go ahead and rotate them and put them on the opposite end as well. And, we do that just by rotating and creating a copy of those. And there we go.
Hey, Esteban, quick question here. Can you show the brake on the actual swivel casters and that are swivel locks? And also could you show how to add a foot brake if, for example, you want to use the cart in a trailer or, like you said earlier, in transit, for example?
Okay, so those parts are available once again through the parts library. We're going to look for, they're going to be in accessories, I believe. No, let's find those there. They're going to be, okay, so there we go. Okay, so these are the foot brakes here that we can go ahead and, again, we're using 4-inch casters. So we're gonna go ahead and look for the 4-inch foot brake. And the beauty about these in this library here is that they have the option of drag and drop with the actual brackets as well. So it's going to simplify the process there for installing your foot brake. Again, I'm going to zoom out and just look at this from my top view because I want to make sure that I set it up where I need it to be. Oftentimes when you're moving these around in perspective, you may get lost and think that they're in one place, but they're actually in another. So the idea here is just to go simple, top view, and then just bring it over to the closer to your structure. And once you have it closer to where it needs to be, then you can go ahead and start to orbit and put it into place. So I'm pretty close there. I'm just going to zoom orbit around and just make sure that I am in place. And then if I really wanted to, again, right, we're using reference points. So why not go ahead and reference that center point to the center point of this bracket. And now I know I'm exactly where I need to be. It's just a matter of placing it wherever the foot brake is going to be placed. So they do have a slight, if we use the guide, we're gonna see the difference in height as far as when they're in the resting position and when they're going to be engaged, right? So the idea is that they are sitting higher than your actual casters where in transit, and then when you press down on the foot brake, they're going to lift up the casters from the ground, making sure that it's nice and stable. So those you can go ahead and apply as you need, and you can also, depending on what it is that you're going to be using it for, you can add a couple there, right? And then go ahead and maybe add a few on the other side as well. And then you're sure that this is going to be very, very stable. So again, look, I'm looking at the center point and I'm going to bring over into the center point of the other caster here, which again, secures the position into the right place. So that's a thought there. If you feel that you've put, if you feel that you need to add more, you can always add more, right? To again, add stability. So there's no right or wrong. Again, oftentimes with any structure that we make, that first one is always essentially a prototype. And the idea is to be able to use that prototype and really break it down so that you can go ahead and essentially understand what you're going to be able to modify to really enhance that particular card to its fullest, right? We want to be lean, we want to be efficient. So again, the operator, the individuals who are going to be using this card, I cannot stress how much their influence and their input, how much more of a difference it makes when you ask your operators what do they feel about a particular structure. So definitely ask as many times as you can to all your operators for their feedback.
It's about
Yes.
quick question out of the Q&A. Could you modify that top shelf with using the AI corner and AI support so we can create some kind of a lip, surrounding
Yes.
that shelf?
Okay,
Please?
so we
Thank
want
you.
to, right, so we want to emphasize and we want to utilize the pipe that is already there, right? We don't want to add more if we can get, if we can do with what we have already. So in this case, what we want to do is just move this HDP out of the way. So in this case, I'm just going to move it 60 inches just so I know. And we're going to go ahead and drag and drop again from the parts library. We're going to go ahead and look for the accessories. In this case, we're going to be looking for that AI connector, AI corner, excuse me. And here it is. So we're just dragging and drop. And again, we're just repeating that same motion with different parts, but it's the same motion that we're using. So here we're going to just go ahead and look for a position. Again, we're going to go ahead and rotate using the arrows to just make sure that we place it in the correct position. And we're going to go ahead and place it around there, but I feel that we're going to have to make sure that we bring it to the correct height. So there we go. Once I'm a little bit closer, I'll go ahead and get a little more detailed on the placement. Here we can see now that we are pretty much where we need to be on that one there. Again, reference point, go to the center, find your point, put it in place. So we can see that we're just using up, down, left, right to position into place. I can go ahead and copy this over now since I've placed it there. I'm going to go ahead and bring it over to this side here. And I'm going to just rotate it to put it in the correct place. And now what I want to do actually is going to get rid of these connectors. I'm going to hide everything. And I'm going to see that I have those two accessories available. And what I'm doing now is I'm selecting them and I'm going to go ahead and copy and rotate those. So what I want to go ahead and use is the rotate tool. And I'm going to base myself from that center midpoint there. So I got rid of the connectors and the tubes just to be able to see my line drawing, just to make sure that I'm exactly in the center of this structure so that when I make a copy, I'm going to go ahead and rotate them around exactly up to the opposite end. And then we'll bring everything back and then we can see that they are in the same position opposite end. So now that we do that, it's just a matter of bringing in this HDPE back and selecting the actual component to go ahead and reduce it so that it's going to be now recessed into those AI corners. There, here we go. So here we are, and now it's just a matter of dropping it just so that it sits on the okay. So what we did now, let's zoom into the, let's go ahead and zoom in and see where we are. Okay, so we're right on top of that one there. But what we've created now is that since we embedded that structure, we no longer have the need for these here, rather they're now obstructing the shelf. So we're going to hide that. We're going to get rid of the tubes and connectors, and we're just going to get rid of these here to be able to generate the structure and get rid of those pipes that are no longer needed in that case. But we need support, right? We want to be able to have something support this particular center point here, the center in the shelving. So if I was to look at the parts that we have available, we can check that in the accessories, there's a couple items also that are going to help and that oftentimes work alongside with the AI connectors, excuse me, the AI corners. So we have a support that we can use, which is the AI center. So we're going to go ahead and use that AI center, but the beauty is the line drawing to go ahead and draw that line, and we will be able to connect that AI center once we draw this line in the middle. So what I want to do is put it in the middle there, and then actually just copy these over and move them out of the way to, let's say, 2.5, just to have enough clearance from the actual pipe that's going to be placed there. Let's generate this here. We'll see that now we have an HJ1 appear. And one of the options that we have within the Creator extension is that we can select these connecting points, and we can look for a particular option available through the toggle alternative box. So now the program is looking for options for this particular area here. So if we look, we can find the HJDS, which is a drop stop. That's not what we're looking for. Maybe we want to go ahead and have, which one is the one we're looking for? We're looking for the AI center. So now we have those AI centers in place. You can see that it was just by the click of a button. We are now where we need to be with that AI center. And now we have the support needed for that particular surface area that we want to have installed there. All right, so think about AI corners working along with the AI centers. This way you'll be able to, and then we can distribute this anywhere along the way, depending on what the support is that you need for your particular structure. Any more questions from the chat that we can answer? So the only thing, well, let's go ahead and add a handle, right? Let's think about handles here. So for this one, we can go ahead and get rid of this pipe and join. We can run let's say 5.25, 5 in the order. We'll go ahead and put this over to the other end and simply go ahead and draw a handle in this case here, okay? So this, again, it's really talking about the operator, thinking about the person that is going to be using the structure to go ahead and ask them, where do they need this handle to be? We seem to have drawn something that is not straight. Okay, we can see here that that is definitely not straight. So we're gonna go ahead and get rid of that, make sure that we're doing it correctly. So we're gonna go ahead and redo this line here. And then we're gonna go up and put this to the one here. Now we should be straight there. And then when thinking about handles, think about maybe adding curved ends to it to avoid any sharp edges around the handles. So let's look at the HJ1 and go ahead and look for another option available, which is the HJ90, which is going to give you that clean, curved finition definition there on the end. Okay. So we're getting ready to, we're at the point where we can go ahead and answer more questions. So we can go ahead and include all the panelists. Now let's go ahead and answer questions from our audience. This flow casters can be placed on the joints. There we go. One of the questions I see here, is there a way to make the decking snap to the edge of the pipe instead of having to manually adjust it? So with all the components that we have, you are looking for reference points, right? So if I look for the reference point on the actual end of the corner, I always think about, or I always say to everybody, man, look for centers, the center point of the connectors to be able to go ahead and snap into place. From there, we know that we can move 5/8 of an inch to the left, and we can go ahead and place it exactly where it needs to be in accordance to your structure, right? It's on the edge. If we look at that from the top view, you can see that it's exactly where we need it to be with the SketchUp now, whenever we move an item, we can kind of see through it, so we can definitely see that it's in the correct position there. But as far as snapping points at this point, we need to think of them as reference points that we can go ahead and use to place our surfaces, and really any accessory that you need to have placed in a particular place. We're going to be looking for reference points. Here we have closer. The closer the foot brake is to the handle, the more chance the operator has to use it. Absolutely. So if that is the case, then we can go ahead and bring this over to maybe we can go ahead and add another tube to go ahead and bring it closer. But in this case, once the operator moves from the side, you can go ahead and lock it into place by just pressing down from the opposite end of each side there. So another question I see here is swivel casters already have swivels lock brake. So the idea with the casters is that you can go ahead and lock those into place, right? They do come with brakes. The difference between those and the stationaries are going to be that those can swivel and these are not. So sometimes we can think about swivels on opposite ends, and then maybe we can add these stationaries in the middle to create a center pivoting point, a central pivoting point. So in this case here, we have, let's get rid of these here just to show that now in this case here for this particular cart, the turning radius is going to be in the center of this particular structure, right? So now we have two swivels on opposite end, creating that central turning radius point there. So it's not a bad idea to maybe go ahead and add another, excuse me, another support here, just to make sure that those there have a strong, rigid support as well there. So we're just going to generate that and create another support across there for those pivoting points there. Okay, so if there's any weight being applied, we know that there's no stress on that particular point on the central turning radius. And one of the questions here, do you happen to have a quick reference guide for SketchUp regarding the commands to quickly design? So we have created, I have a PDF that I can send again. If you have, let's go back to the PowerPoint here, and then we're going to talk a little bit about more information. And ideally now, we're at the point now where we can go ahead and think about, okay, maybe you don't want to design yourself, so we can go ahead and design for you. If you wanted to, you just send us an email, we can design for you. If you want to go ahead and continue to use, if you haven't used the extension and you want to use the extension, again, it's completely free. And we have tons of information. We have a YouTube channel that you can find. We have a lot of the information, again, at flexpipepaint.com, where we have all kinds of tutorials, all kinds of videos, and FAQ section that can answer how to use the Flexpipe Creator extension. And if you want the PDF, go ahead and drop your email on the chat, and we can go ahead and make sure that you have that PDF so that you can continue to draw with the Flexpipe Creator extension. Whichever way you choose, again, we're here to help. So whether it's me through the one-on-one training session, or it's one of the project managers that you get in contact with, we're more than happy to help you guys out. I also do web sessions where we can go ahead and just emphasize more one-on-one. Again, you choose your availability, and then I'm more than happy to help with designing anything in particular, and to help you guys out if you ever get stuck across the way along the road. Again, if you want that PDF, go ahead and send us your email, and we'll be more than happy to send it your way, as well as the recording of today. If you want the recording, then we're going to be able to go ahead and send it that way as well. Okay, guys? The last thing I want to say is thank you for joining us today season's greetings and a happy new year. And don't be shy. Let us know what you want. Let us know what you need. Again, book a meeting with me, and we can go ahead and further discuss anything that you have in mind. Okay, guys? So whether it's us drawing or whether you want to draw yourself, we can always help you there. Can you show how to get those free sessions with you? Okay, so basically, let's head over to Flexpipe Inc. We're going to go ahead and look at the creator, learning. We're going to go ahead to learning, and then we're going to head over to web sessions. So once you click over here, we're going to see that now we have available the book training calendar. And again, it's just choosing the availability according to you. And, we have 45-minute sessions. We can do as many as you'd like. It's just a matter of clicking on the calendar and finding a time slot that suits, that makes sense for you. So it's simple as that. Once you create your meeting, go ahead and just confirm, and then you can go ahead and just receive the booking confirmation, and pretty much that's all it takes there. And then I'll see you guys via the web session. So that is a nice way to go ahead and fine tune the skills. A lot of times the webinars are a little bit more generalized, so we can go ahead and emphasize a little bit more direct on a particular item that you may want to talk about. If one of our panelists wants to go ahead and join in and say anything as far as Flexpipe and what we can offer, go ahead and do so. And also, if you want to wish everybody a joyous Christmas, then now is a good moment.
Thank you, Esteban.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Esteban.
I think Tammy would like to sing a Christmas song to us all. All right, guys. Thank you guys for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be able to spend time and share information with everybody. It's good to challenge each other. So again, you can always send us a chat, and we'll be more than happy to help out with anything that we can. Okay, guys, take care. And last thing I want to say is we are in the business of improving. So if there's something that you see that we can go ahead and improve on, don't be shy. That is the idea, to help everybody become a little bit better. We all learn along the way. And then also drop down the chat, send us your information. And like I said, we're here to help. Okay, guys? So take care, and I'll see you guys for the next webinar.
Hey, Step, il est parti, Step?